Can I explain what you just said? Separate, like she's thinking about you.
I talked about getting a new camera.
Yeah.
You got parts, right?
Yeah, I got it.
As we had
There's
discussed
nothing to
last
say.
week.
I'm a busy gal with old Kenny body.
Yeah.
This is our heavy
I'm
night
not.
because I have mine and Kenny.
All right, good evening, everybody. We're going to begin here shortly. If you can silence your cell phones,
Agree to leave.
and council members ensure your microphones are turned on.
Every day.
I am all over the place, I'll tell you that. All right, today is February 26, 2024. It's a regular legislative meeting of Barberton City Council. Before we begin our regular legislative meeting, we do have individual committee meetings this evening. And we'll start with City Properties, Parks, and Recreation with Mr. Cheatham, but he is absent, and Ms. Gerhart.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I'd like to bring the City Properties, Parks, and Recreation Committee to order. It is Monday, February 26, 2024, and the time is 6:04 p.m. We are in council chambers. The members of my committee who are present are myself as co-chair, Mrs. Hager, and President Greer. Not in attendance this evening is Mr. Cheatham, who is chair. All other council members are present, as well as those who are noted on my sheet. And we have no requests for new legislation at this time. And nothing pending. Are there any topics for miscellaneous discussion from the committee? From the body? From the gallery? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
A second?
I'll second.
Thank you. The meeting is also adjourned at 6:04 p.m.
Thank you, Ms. Gerhart.
You're welcome.
Next up is Public Welfare and Safety with Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I'd like to bring the Public Welfare and Safety Committee to order. It is February 26, 2024. The time is 6:05. We're in council chambers. All members of my committee are present, including myself as chair. Ms. Gerhart, Mr. Greer, and Mr. Cheatham is absent this evening. We have no request for legislation, no pending legislation. Do I have anything for miscellaneous from my committee? Rest of council? Gallery? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Can I get a second? All right, we are adjourned at 6:05 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Next up, it's Rules, Marketing, and Development. Ms. Gerhart.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I'd like to bring Rules, Marketing, and Development Committee to order. It is Monday, February 26, 2024, and the time is 6:06 p.m. We are in council chambers. All members of my committee are present, including myself as chair, Mrs. Beck, Mr. Heidick, and President Greer. All their council members and others as noted on my sheet. We have one new request for legislation at this time, a letter from Stacy Carr, Strategic Planner, requesting to approve the amendments to the 2019 and 2023 CDBG Annual Action Plan. They have requested an emergency wording and one reading, and I've asked if Pete could tell us more about that this evening.
Thank you, Council. I appreciate it. I'll start with the 2019. So I guess just for everyone new, the reason we do this, we create things called annual action plans for CDBG. It's how we intend on spending those funds in any given year, and it's a process that's vetted by the public. For our 2019, this is when we received our COVID dollars. So it's part of our 2019 annual action plan, but we received them, the actual funds, in 2020, but before the 2020 annual action plan was approved by HUD, so they had us add it to the 2019. What we're doing with this proposal is we're looking to move excess dollars from the administrative pot of money to over just over to public service. The reason we do this is so the money is readily available for us to use. This is how we were able to do projects even as recently as providing extra funding for Backham for their food pantry and adding equipment for those. This is something we met with our HUD representatives, and they kind of informed us that for the COVID dollars, this would probably be the best use and the simplest way to spend those dollars, as guidelines were a little bit unclear. For our 2023 annual action plan, all we're doing for this is we're looking at projects from the 2022 cycle, that's where we did a lot of the large-scale projects like the skate park, the active transportation plan, sidewalks, the Tide Flex flood mitigation program. What we're really looking at is housekeeping. So if we had excess money, so say our Tide Flex program, which came in almost $55,000 under budget, right now for that annual action plan, that money is locked up specifically for that 2022 capital infrastructure. We're basically just requesting to HUD and from the public that we move that over to the 2023 pots of money so that it's readily available for us to continue using. It isn't locked up in past cycles. For this, we did, let me get my sheet here. We did publish our intent and what we were proposing to do in the Southside Leader back in December of 2020, or December 22nd of last year. We held 2 public meetings, one on January 17th and one on January 24th. And the public comment period officially ended on January 26th. We received no comments from the public with concerns about what we were proposing to do. This then went before the Planning Commission on February 21st, where it was unanimously recommended to be approved by council. If you have any questions about what the process looks like, how the monies are intended to be spent, I'd be happy to answer anything you have questions on.
Well, Director, I'm sorry, Chair.
Yes.
Just for my clarification here, for the housing rehabilitation, the it's labeled under here as RLF. What's that?
So yes, so we have a pot of money called entitlement. That is the pot of money that we receive annually from HUD. We also have an established pot of money called the revolving loan fund, which is divided into 2. It can be used for economic development and housing rehabilitation. We had been sitting on and building our revolving loan fund for quite some time in the past years, and we needed to spend that money down in order to try to entitle this. So we made the decision that we would exclusively do our housing rehabilitation from revolving loan, so other monies that would have been spent from that from our entitlement could be used for things like capital infrastructure sidewalk programs. So it's just a way of maximizing how much money we could efficiently spend to meet timeliness.
Okay, and for the housing rehabilitation program, that's the revolving, that's a loan, right? That's what
So
who's eligible for that?
So it is income qualified, and it's revolving loan, but it doesn't have to be used in the form of a loan. So we do benefit our low to moderate income residents by providing them grant services to make necessary repairs to their homes.
Okay, and that's solely for the use of homeowners or landlords too as well?
Typically, we try and do more for actual home ownership.
Okay. All right.
There are different stipulations that can be put in place. If it is because if it's someone who is a landlord and would be servicing, we'd have to show that they are benefiting low to moderate income clientele.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going through here. CBG is one of the main fundings we use for raising houses. Are we rolling any extra funds in to raise some of these dilapidated houses that we have?
We chose not to with the 2023, and that's based on consultation with Stacy Carr, who manages that on our department. We're in a pretty good place right now, but keep in mind that the 2024 annual action plan will be coming out. We'll probably be coming before council. I'm thinking, I'd estimate probably in May or June. And we will be allocating specific money for demolition for that program for the 2024 funds.
Okay. One more question. Sorry, I've had questions as you're talking. These funds rolling over, being allocated, are we going to put extra money in certain extra money in raising houses? Because we're kind of bringing over excess money from other years, so that means we wouldn't have to spend as much. Right.
So a lot of the money that we're carrying over, or that was proposed to carry over, is going to be largely for economic development, capital infrastructure, and housing rehabilitation. That's where we're seeing the most need at this exact moment in time. But again, when we're doing the 2024 annual action plan, we will be moving forward and adding quite a bit into demo. We're always talking with Stacy to see what her list looks like, to see what the need is, and if she tells us, yes, I need more in CDBG, we absolutely give her more from CDBG.
Okay. Well, awesome. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Does anybody else have any questions about that? Do I have a motion to call for this?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All members voting to call this piece of legislation of committee signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Opposed? I have nothing pending. I would like to ask everybody to please get any rule changes or suggestions over to me. I've received a few, but just want to put out this reminder in case there are more. Are there any topics for miscellaneous discussion from the committee?
Did
Oh,
you
I'm
mo-
sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. Did you make a motion to call for that piece of legislation? That was? Okay.
My motion.
First and second and all. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I'm losing it. No.
It's okay. Are there any topics for miscellaneous discussion from the committee or the body? The gallery? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We are adjourned at 6:14 PM.
Thank you, Ms. Garrett.
You're welcome.
Next up is City Utilities with Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. President. City Utilities. I would like to call this meeting to order today, February 26th. We are in council chambers. All members of my committee are present, including myself as chair, Jennifer Hager, Emily Beck, and Justin Greer, and all others noted. Tonight, we have no requests for legislation. Do we have any miscellaneous discussion from council or from the gallery for city utilities? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Ms. Hager. Second.
I will second.
Thank you, Ms. Emily. We are adjourned at 6:15. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Last but not least, Finance and Personnel with Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to bring the Finance and Personnel Committee to order. It is Monday, February 26, 2024, 6:16 PM here in council chambers. All members of my committee are present, which includes myself as chair, Mr. Heidick, Mr. Griffin, and President Greer. All other council members are also present, with the exception of Mr. Cheatham, who is absent. We have no new requested legislation, as that is reserved for Committee of the Whole nights. We do have several pieces of pending legislation. The first being ordinance number 14-2024, title 2024 Operating and Capital Budget, an ordinance adopting a budget for various funds of the City of Barberton for the period beginning January 1, 2024, and providing for the administration thereof and declaring it an emergency. There was a proposed amendment that we had discussed last week after Mr. Teodecki had discussed some additional funds that are available. Did everybody receive the printout of that? Do we have any questions? Hearing none, can I have a motion to accept this amendment as proposed?
I'll motion to accept, excuse me. I'll motion to amend to accept the request.
Thank you. And a second?
I'd like to second the request amendment.
All right, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Moving on, we have an amendment to ordinance number 73-2022, employee compensation and pay grades for non-bargaining employees, and ordinance amending ordinance number 73-2022, declaring an Mr. Harris had contacted me as he had looked up the current wages for AFSCME bargaining employees, and for the 2024, for the account clerk, step 1 is $18.10, and our amended version has step 1 at $15.74. Mrs. Eisen, if you wouldn't mind just kind of explaining where those numbers came from.
So step 1 account clerk is $18.92. And then for, you're asking why it's only going to be, can you repeat the numbers?
No, I'm sorry.
I don't.
Mr. Harris had found it, it was published online, correct?
It's the, it would be the AFSCME contract, which is on CERB's website.
Yeah, the SERB has the, only the year 1. They
Well-
didn't take into account the increase each year. That wage table comes out each year thereafter.
I have the wages for 2024.
Right, and what do you say account clerk is?
Account clerk, which step?
Step 1,
1810.
it's $18.92.
So CERB is wrong?
Yes.
Okay. Can you provide us with the current?
Sure, finance department, I'll get that from Teresa.
Okay, great, thank you.
I think that answers that then.
That gives us an idea of what,
Okay.
Yeah,
what
that's fine.
formula it was and
Alright.
stuff like that, and I think Mr. Flaker's going to provide that formula.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Are there any other questions or remarks regarding the pay grades? Moving on, ordinance number 16-2024, the note ordinance, stormwater management system project. Are there any questions or comments regarding this? Okay. Ordinance number 17-2024, note ordinance for street improvement project. Any comments or questions? Okay. Ordinance number 18-2024, no ordinance meter reading system replacement project. Are there any questions or comments? Ordinance number 19-2024, no ordinance front loader acquisition project. Are there any questions, comments? Ordinance number 20-2024, no ordinance trickling filter system at wastewater treatment plant. Are there any questions or comments? All right, is there any miscellaneous discussion for finance? Any from the gallery, department heads? Hearing none, can I have a motion to adjourn, please? Thank you. And a second?
For a second, are we doing budget during the committee meeting, or?
It doesn't matter.
It's up to you.
Yeah, we can do it now. Get into the.
Thank you very much. We have two budgets, two departments that will be presenting tonight, parks and courts, various budgets within both of those departments. So I'll remind council and also those presenting, please go by the page numbers so everyone can follow along. Not sure if someone wants to go first. Parks up first.
Good evening, everyone. I have quite a few accounts. I think part of it's from the beautification department merging into Parks and Rec at one point in time. But my accounts start on page 72 and 178. Ask any questions, go ahead. Ask me, if I was moving on to the accounts.
Director.
Yes.
On page 72, the account ending in 540, marketing and advertising, it's quite an increase on the budget. Is there a...
Yes, that's because we had, I think everyone in here got mailed our program guide for this year. We are actually also adding a second program guide this year, and we've involved the other city departments in the program guide this year too.
Thank you.
This is not really a question, but more of a comment. I just want to give you guys props for that. That program you guys put out had the road list on it, had all kinds of information in it. So,
Thanks. Any other questions on page 72? Page 73. Questions on 73?
Thank you, Director. The first one, ending in 110, senior center salaries, there's a pretty big jump in that one.
Yeah, we have a part-time clerk. Her pay was actually coming out of a different account, so we moved it into that account to cover salary.
Thank you.
I felt like the program supplies went up also. Was that because of that?
That's to, we're redoing our fitness room. So we're getting all new, we're actually making it a fitness room right now. It's just a couple treadmills and some random equipment. We actually have a whole circuit of exercise equipment that'll be going in there for our seniors. I questioned them when I were asking them, a lot of people said refer them to the Y. And a lot of them feel intimidated working out at the Y. They'd rather work out in the center, so that's where that money is going to.
So this is just because it happened a few years ago. There was quite an increase for cleaning supplies. Has that all been COVID related?
No, that's actually the cleaning service that we have. That pays actually the monthly service for the cleaning supplies as well as the cleaning supplies.
Oh, okay.
Mr. President, can we jump back to page 72 under 2320, the training and travel?
Yes.
The increase there, what?
That's, I know a couple of us are going back to school for our masters, so that's compensation for that. As well as professional development for the staff. Else on 73.
Page 74, 1122, the increase from, like last year you budgeted 10.5 for the summer playground wages, and it's up to 25,000 this year.
Yeah, we plan on going back to the park play program. We'll actually have summer 2 employees at the parks with the pavilions, and they'll be running programming for the kids in the summer.
What parks is that?
Right now, we haven't totally identified it. It actually got cut from what I had in there. I had planned on doing it at every park with a pavilion, but we'll probably be able to do 4. So we're going to kind of do one in each sector of town right now, but I haven't identified exactly which parks.
I'll say with that, there's been an increase in wages you've seen across the board everywhere. But also the schools, I don't believe, are having their summer programs, which they've had the last few years. So we anticipate more kids going to the parks in the summertime.
that's, the school's programs actually kind of put a major hit on our summer camp. The schools were offering free camp. They were picking them up from their bus stops. They were feeding them, so it kind of almost diminished our camp to where we do like pop-up field trips and different things. So we had to restructure our angle of for the community, for the kids.
Since we're on that page 74, the change in the OPERS, OPRS.
That's retirement.
So the budget went up that much?
Yeah,
For that?
I didn't. That's straight from Jeremy with finance adjusted that. I didn't touch that.
It could be because he said the fund, it was paid out of a different account before, so now there would be an increase in numbers.
Yeah, but would it go up that much?
It might have been a fat finger syndrome.
Because I'm looking at it, actually spent $656 last year, and then we're budgeting $11,200 this year.
Yeah, that's probably his fat finger syndrome. That's probably
I could see maybe 1,200.
We got with 74. All right, next one will be 104 of 170.
You're on page 104 or 103?
104.
Yeah.
Yeah, 104.
On those, the revenue funds there for like softball league fees and outside league fees, the drastic increase in the projection.
The
Can you tell me?
money was going into the wrong account, some of the stuff we were, and that started up front at our front desk. We were putting the money in the wrong account, so.
What account was it going into?
It was, I'm not, I don't have that, I can let you know what account it was.
Okay. Because I was just looking at,
And then we actually do have more leagues. We picked up a Women's Wednesday League. Akron shut down their league, so that's a full night of league play that we'll do. Our Tuesday and Thursday, they are pretty much selling out now. And then we possibly might pick up a kickball league on Fridays. So there's an increase in play at the complex too.
okay.
Is that where the baseball overtime's coming from as
Yes.
well? Okay.
I'd also like to point out on that page, the electric power, that was an ARPA project. So for the lights over at the sports complex, around $30,000 every year we would spend. With the change to LED, they spent just over $15,000.
You said that was ARPA?
More questions on 103, we can go to 104. No questions on 104, we can go to 110 of 170.
Can you talk about the ODNR grant?
Yeah, that's something we received. I have a list of grants that we're applying for again this year. ODNR Foundation, we apply every year. Ohio Parks and Recreation, and AARP grants that we're applying for.
And that goes for like when you guys take the kids out and,
Well, they're all different projects. So like the last two that we applied for, we got one of them. The one was for McCafferty Park, the Limitless Playground. We actually got the money for that. That was reimbursed. We paid and we got reimbursed for that. And then we actually applied for a grant for Anadine that was denied for the walking trail.
okay.
And we also got fishing and boating grant from ODNR last year. It was for $10,000. And it was for like fishing derby and classes on the lake.
Are you gonna try to go for the Anadine again, or once it's denied?
Well, the
it's-
trail is done. I mean, we could do like the park cleanup piece of
Sure.
it and tree work, but the trail actually got done.
Yeah.
in the fall.
Okay.
No more questions on 110. We can go to 111. No questions on 111. We go to 112.
I have a quick question, actually. For Labor Day Festival, we really only budget $1,000 for that?
That was just for the fishing derby. We stopped it.
Okay.
Fish for that. Main Street took over that whole festival, so we just provide. Our department, we do the fishing derby, coordinate the fireworks, and then the parade on the Monday. Go to 112.
For the special programs, does that include like the summer park programs that you were talking about?
Yeah, all of our programs. We just had Sweetheart Dance. We have Halloween. We have Easter stuff coming up. Pretty much all of our special programs throughout the year. Go to 113.
Mr. Patterson, what are some of the major improvements that we're gonna do? I know you're talking about college and stuff.
Yeah,
This time,
major improvements. It's not as much as last year. Last year we did a lot. I mean, we did 2 pickleball courts, 2 sets of pickleball courts, tennis courts, park cameras, disc golf. It was quite a bit. This year it's a lot smaller. We're going to add heat to the bathrooms, the ones with the court, pickleball courts, and Decker. We're also replacing the fountain at Lake Anna. That's been down. And then cameras at Waltz Park too. We had cameras in all of the other parks. Waltz did not have cameras, so we had cameras at Waltz.
what are you gonna do at, Park Street? I know you guys had a meeting.
Yeah,
Are you
I
ready
met
for
with
that
the-
now, or?
Yeah, we got a game. We have putting together a game plan for that. The play structure is scheduled to be installed end of next month,
Mhm.
and then we have some other idea. I don't want to
You don't want to
Should I-
sit into it
So, I
now.
mean, we're looking at fencing, we're looking at parking, we're looking at some pavilions and things. We have to go to Parks Commission, Planning Commission, and then contracts and stuff from the city council.
So we're not finished.
No. And I actually have some other ideas, but I'll
Right.
let it.
We're getting quotes right now on a lot of different things.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry, so you said adding heat to some of the bathrooms, cameras down at Waltz.
Yes.
What were some of the
Replacing
other
the fountain.
The
improvements?
fountain at the lake.
Oh, right, okay.
What line is this on the budget?
No, that-
Discussion.
Okay.
it's on the very first page. There's 60,000 in improvements other than buildings. That's where that one's coming from.
Okay, I thought it was on this $12,000 line, that's
No,
not
it's on,
wrong.
it's on page 72 at the bottom.
Okay.
Account ending in 53730.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Done with 113, we can move to page 130. Go ahead.
Do we plan on, like, at Haynes and 31st, Cleveland, Madison, where that splits off and stuff, are we gonna do anything with that beautification
That's
wise?
been our maintenance guys have been battling that. It has some crazy weed that grows in there, and then there's no water source to actually water whatever plants we put in there. So we're trying to come up with a solution for that item.
Because I've been asked about that.
Yeah, I've been asked since I've been here.
You know, I think last year there was probably foot-high weeds through the whole thing, and they're like, where's the flowers?
Yeah, there's no water source, so.
There's a similar, over on Gale,
Yeah,
across from Waltz as well. That's the same situation.
yeah.
Yeah, we've looked at several scenarios. You know, if you think over at Fire Station 2 at 5th and State, we kind of changed that around. Ripped out most of the dirt, topsoil, and put rock in there, and we put some low maintenance plants in there, and things of that nature. So to have anything that has like beautiful color every year, you need a water source.
Yeah. That's the one
Right.
that Scoops adopted, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but we're looking at alternatives.
Yes.
The one on 31st Street that was referenced there, any thought of just concreting it and calling it a day?
I mean, that sounds. I don't know. I mean, he's shaking his head like no.
We're looking at
We're gonna fight.
we're looking at
You and I, baby.
Thank you.
Get somebody to adopt it. I'll help.
Yeah, Ward 6 Council.
Brogan can adopt it.
In your driveway.
Are we allowed to do anything with that since it's technically city property? I know, like, I can't take my lawnmower down to the park and mow the grass.
Right.
No, there's some of the islands are adopted, like Scoops did.
Yeah.
It's still a safety issue also, since you have cars on all sides. So we want to make sure that, you know, there's proper signage up when people are there, because if you're there to volunteer, you're focused on weeding or whatever, you're not focused on drivers. And we know drivers don't pay attention all the time either, so we want to make sure that everyone stays safe. We do have an adopt a road program, and there's certain guidelines and things like that, so kind of the same thing.
Well, we have adopted a park, but we were told we're not allowed to mow. So,
Yeah, you can't go mow the park.
well, sometimes it needs done, Mayor.
Spring gets a little
Tell
crazy.
some of the other
Grows
residences to
outside.
mow theirs, and our guys will have time.
Ay, caramba.
Ask for forgiveness.
Oh, I know. Funny. Oh, gosh. I'm with you.
All right, we can move on to page 131.
Seasonal wages, 1120. Didn't spend anything last year. Budgeted $3,000 this year. On 131.
I think you're down too far.
That's the health and life insurance.
Oh, my bad.
It happens.
Do you want my ruler?
No, I don't want your ruler. Get glasses.
Under the repair and maintenance supplies is a little bit of a jump there. Is there some things going south on us?
No, that's just one of the accounts that we use for like tree damage and things like that. So you can't predict trees falling. That's kind of like our emergency.
I know, but that's health and life insurance.
More questions? We go to page 175.
Can I ask what crafts we spent $1,300 on last year?
That's for the senior center. So I can give you one of our newsletters, but we have a lot of crafts going on. I mean, we have our own keel in there. I mean, we do quite a bit.
So why not raise that budget a little bit if it looks like years past, 300 has been budgeted, and that's what it's kind of stuck to, but last year it seemed to really jump up there.
We've been providing more activities for the seniors. I mean, our
Yeah.
memberships have gone up. We get new members all the time. We just want to make it a place for our seniors. So.
I think she's asking
No,
why
I
you
think
only
that's awesome.
budgeted
I'm just wondering why
300.
you didn't increase it if you're
The
adding
budget is still at only
things to
300.
that.
Yeah, I mean, because we moved some of the money around too. So like we put the 5,000 up there.
I think we want to make sure it's not just a one-time increase, right? You want to be conservative on the revenue and make sure that you actually have revenue coming in.
Yeah, like I said, not that it's a lot. I mean, it's like $1,000 difference, but just years past, it's always been right around 300, and it jumped up to 1,300. So I just didn't know if it's something you want to look at.
We go to page 176, the last page.
As far as the wages go, for the senior center, is that just coming out of somewhere else? Is that
Well,
why
that's the money that it was coming from the money that we moved in earlier.
Okay.
This is where it was at.
Perfect.
You moved that senior center employee over to whatever page it was on there. Okay.
No more questions? my comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And feel free to email me or call me if you got any other questions. You see something that you didn't see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we'll have Mr. Incravati talk about the different funds in the court budget.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Mr. Incravati is my father. I'm Bob. And, you know, thank you for the page notation on these, because, you know, all right, so 2016 or so, this is maybe, my 8th time doing this, and it wasn't until like 2 years ago, maybe, where someone said, what page is that on? I didn't have page numbers. I have page numbers. I printed out my spreadsheet.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's like, okay,
I remember
numbers
that.
here.
He would have
And
no
it's like,
page
okay,
numbers.
so now, like the last couple, I've had the page numbers, but I'm thinking, like the first 4 years when I was up here doing this, I didn't have page numbers. You know, it's just like you were bored to tears apparently, and I didn't really ask. So I'm here for the courts, right? So we're a two-judge court, and you all, I think, are familiar with that. Just a little bit of background. You know, two judges, Judge Todd McKinney, Judge Anna Stevenson. We have 2 full-time judicial bailiffs, right, that run crazy. We have an outside service bailiff full-time, right? We have a full-time magistrate, all right? And then we have 4 full-time probation officers. One's indicated as a probation secretary or administrative assistant. She's a full-time probation officer, and is really titled as that when we gave it a position. And then part-time, right? I've got 2 part-time court security officers that run here, and they shift 40 hours a week, about 20 hours between the 2 of them all. So that's essentially the operation. Katie Reed, clerk of courts, has about 12 people in her office that runs it. But I've got 4 full-time probation, 2 full-time judicial bailiffs. I've got a full-time magistrate, outside service bailiff, and then a full-time court administrator, and then our 2 part-time guys. And much like everything else you see, you know, our budget is a hybrid, right? I've got 101 general fund operations out of 2. I've got court general, and I've got probation general 101. And then this myriad, as you've seen, of you know, special project funds. And their funding sources are a little different, so we'll go through and talk about those a little bit. So with that out of the way, our first one up, hey, it's page 48. Hopefully these are right after all that litany. 48 I show as the municipal court judges general fund. All right, and that's mostly our personnel, okay? Judges' salaries. Judges' salaries are set by statute, okay? And they're comprised of really essentially 3 different sources. The city has a component, county has a component, and state has a component. And that is then the judicial salaries, and they are fixed by statute. Their increases or whatnot are handled by statute and haven't really impacted us at all, right? Our numbers for judicial salaries out of our 101 general have stayed the same. They continue to stay the same, which is nice. Beyond that, then, so the judicial administrative assistant, we don't really use that, okay? So our judicial bailiffs, the bailiff salaries, those are the ones that are doing the load of the work. Those are our 2 full-time judicial bailiffs and our outside service bailiff that runs. Court administrator, myself. Court security officers, we finally broke them out. They were lumped into bailiffs as well. Court security officers are your part-time guys we get out here, right? So 2 guys working 20 hours a week. That's where your armed court security comes into play, right? Supreme Court's best practices say, hey, armed security for what goes on in here. And luckily we're in a good community. We have, and it's a misdemeanor court, it's a traffic court, misdemeanor offenses, but things, can maybe get a little hairy. So you do want armed security. Well, that allows us then the ability to present that and not pay an awful lot for it, because we're using individuals from Summit County, retired from Summit County Sheriff's Office, that still maintain a commission to carry a firearm. And then they can do that then on this floor. When we split with the city on your screening security downstairs for your metal detector, those guys that do a wonderful job down there, we save a good bit of money there because they are unarmed. We don't need to pay for armed security at that level, right? So that's the first level of security, gets screened into the building. Then up at this floor, things sort of get a little hairy. You have armed security, and those are the 2 part-time guys. So those are your court security officers. The rest are just payroll expenses, right? The health insurance, OPERS, et cetera. Gym memberships, which we pick up outside of that. Then we get into operations, training and travel, the conferences, judicial conferences that they need to go to, the educations that they need to maintain to keep that. That kind of took a back seat when you look back to 2020, obviously during the COVID years. We're starting to build those numbers back in. So we're back to maybe the pre-COVID level, and so the request there is kind of where I think we're heading now that we're going to be traveling and doing those more in person rather than virtually, which is much better. The rest are things that are really kind of set minimally, right? I don't have a lot that we're expending there. We tend to pick that up on our special project funds. So when we get to that section, we'll talk a little bit more about that, and where we pick up some of our operating expenditures out of our special project funds. Any questions with regard to the 101 general for court? Yes.
Thank you. Just curious, the 2023 actual under judges' salaries was an odd number. Is there something weird that happened there?
Well, weird. Really, yes. A couple different things. I can go on. So what happened? So Judge Joe Flagg Lancer, right? She won a seat on the Court of Appeals. She was elected to the Court of Appeals. That began February 11th of last year. How many years did it run, right? Last year she starts February 11th. So we ride visiting judges until the appointment of her replacement by the governor. And that appointment was Judge Edina Stevenson, who then subsequently secured election to the seat, the unexpired term. And that happened in July, right? So from February 11th to July, I'm running visiting judges, getting visiting judges in here to come in and cover week after week after week. And fortunately for the city and us, really makes it simpler. The Supreme Court changed the payroll structure for visiting judges, right? So you retire from a seat, you can become a visiting judge, and you can ride the circuit, old school stuff, right? You can go out, you can be a judge somewhere in this county for a week, or this municipality for a week, or a couple days here or there. The Supreme Court pays that, and then looks back to the county. So I report those hours that we've used visiting judges for to the county, and the Supreme Court will come calling to the county at year end just to say, okay, here's what we show countywide that you owe the Supreme Court for the visiting judges used in your county. Common Police Court level, Court of Appeals, kinda, but certainly Common Police Court level and the municipal courts within your county. There it is, and it rides at the county. It never trickles back to us. It has not. We used to have to and when you bring a visiting judge in, we used to have to get them on a payroll. Teresa was here because she really amended this. Had to get them on payroll. They had to become city employees. They had to do a basic application for that judge to become a city employee because they would get a check from the city. So it was just a mess. So they would get a check from the city, get a check from the county, and then get a check from the state. The Supreme Court just changed it. They changed that structure, and now it is strictly just a check from the state. And then the Supreme Court comes calling to the county, and it stops there. So we got a little bit of a windfall, is what that number is, right? So that won't happen here going forward. We'll get back to that other number that we've kind of used and seen consistently throughout the course of the years. So, but that's an excellent question.
Thank you.
Anything else on that one? Okay, the next one is probation, 4 full-time probation officers. That would roll over to page 49, I believe. Yeah, wait. All right. Oh, no, 49 is clerk. That's Katie's budget. So 68 would be the 101, 4235, and that's probation. So what do we have here? You have 3 probation officers that have been paid historically out of the 101, and a small increase in their percentage. We're able to do a little something for them to help keep the staff. We've got good probation officers right now, man. We rely on them heavily. We don't have much in the way of putting people in jail in this court. First off, we're frustrated sometimes with the county, what we can or can't do, but they have their frustrations as well, right? So, we just really can't cart people off to the county jail or send them to the county jail effectively. So what happens is you rely heavily and just lean heavily on the probation department for alternative programming. Use a lot of house arrests, a lot of monitoring, scram monitoring for alcohol purposes, right? A lot of reporting, things of that nature. So they are a busy staff, and that's what you have here in this juncture. So this is the general fund where we've got a modest increase to them here. We've taken some of what we needed to do for them to kind of get their salaries in line. We've done that a little later on in the budget, which we'll talk about. Then beyond that are strictly just the payroll costs. And again, same kind of thing here. We're trying to put our burden, and we are a burden to you, right? I mean, the statute says there shall be a municipal court in the city of Barberton. Well, there we are, all right? Yes, sorry. And so we're here. And what can we do to lessen that financial impact? Well, we use these special project funds, and the statute allows us to kind of develop some of those, and we'll talk about it. So you don't see a lot of operation expenditures here. The copy machine, probably with any department, is like a perpetual fight. So I know Rebecca's looking to change over to another system next year, so we're not sure exactly how those numbers are going to fall, but that will be something that she may change that copy release. Beyond that, it's minimal. We're just minimal supplies and everything of that nature in the expenditures. Questions with that one? Okay. So we'll get on to the more fun ones. Let me go to page 93. 93 will be what I'll call a 208 fund. And we'll continue with probation. So page 93 is a 208 probation services fund. So probation services fund is going to be comprised of a few different funding sources. We'll start at the top, but it's not the primary one. I think what you have listed there at the top are the grants that we get for our specialized dockets from the Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services, right? And then also there's a small ADM grant that comes into play. Our specialized docket courts are twofold. We have a mental health court and we have a drug court. Right? There are certifications that we apply for from the Supreme Court to qualify to act. They have their applications, their program materials they want to see from us. They come visit us, they watch the operation, and then they certify. And once you're certified, then you qualify to then, based on your enrollment, pull in a little bit of money from the Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services Board. So we get about, what, 55,000 or so from them annually, and that is a great help. It's a great help. Do things really more towards payroll to some degree, but also just some assistance for those that are just trying to get their feet straight, right? So we were able to do that. So those funds come from grant. The rest are supervision fees, and again, those are out of the pockets of those that are participating. And so we try to be a little mindful there in what we're doing, not to run away too much with supervision fees. And you notice it kind of stayed the same, if not fallen back a little bit, but we've been able to rely on other funding sources to kind of get things done. But those are the resource levels. What do we pay out of that in that specialized project fund? We pay for it, and you'll see the 51113, the probation secretary. That's the first line item there on personal services. That is a probation officer. One of ours, she at one point started as administrative assistant, just did a wonderful job, plugged right into this, and has been just phenomenal. So she truly is a full-fledged probation officer, full-time probation officer. So that is that role, and then strictly just her payroll expenses after that. Then from there, we get into some more of the expenditures in our 208 fund for probation that you didn't see in the 101, and that is the operations and maintenance for training and travel, for professional services. We still like to, out of that 208 fund, budget this amount. We're able to kind of do some more things at professional services and other funds that I'll explain. That was a welcome change. And then beyond that, it is, you'll just see money in and money out as far as budget for those grants from the Ohio Ohio Mental Health and Human Services, the addiction services. Whatever we do get in goes out, all right? Not a big thing I think really heavily impacts us here, but they run on a fiscal year of July 1 to June 30th, and we all run on January 1 to December 31st, and so I'm trying to keep those expended, and we're sometimes running short on one end just because the budget hasn't been funded through here. But those come in, those come out, and we do expend all of those funds every year. Are there any questions with 208 probation? Okay, then we'll go to 209 on page 94. So 209, and I'll say both of this. So 208 for probation is a separate statute. 209 and 211 that we'll get to is the building fund. 209 is our general operations. They're creatures of statute. So there's a statute that will indicate, hey, look, for the efficient operation of the court can determine additional funds are necessary for its operation for certain things, right, to be expended by journal entry. And so the court can determine an amount to play. So when you have fines and court costs assessed on a case, your fines are your fines. They go to the department, the agency that cited. If you have the court costs, well, what happens to those? Well, that's the component here. There's some state components, there's victims assistance components, there's public defender components, and then there's court costs that are these funds that they generate, all right? So essentially, they generate the operation out of the 208. And so from here, we pay our full-time magistrate. You will see his expenditures there. That is a 60-40 split. So our magistrate makes more than the number you see there, but the county picks up 40% of that. The city picks up 60, and then we pick up 40. All right. Then the rest are professional services out of 209, office expenses, and this will stay short of like toners and things of that nature. We use computer fund for that, but just paper and some general operation, pens and whatnot that we go through there, folders, files, things like that. And then the general fund reimbursement. So annually on a monthly basis, by journal entry, the court reimburses the city $450,000 just to help offset that 101 fund that we ask you for out of the probation, or excuse me, the court general operation. So $450 goes back to the city general fund every year out of our operation fund. So questions there? Yes.
Under the operations and maintenance, the professional services, from year to year, it seems like it ping pongs up and down. Is there a reason it does that?
Yes, and in a couple of different ways. So unfortunately, I don't say unfortunately, really more Jeremy's thing has to deal with when we submit bills late. This was last year's expenditure. Why? So we don't know often right out of the gate where some of these services are going to get paid from, right? Let's take Oriana. There's a large one, right? And they do a wonderful job for us, provide a lot of different programming. Somebody's going to hit their intake. They may come from us, they may come from Acre, wherever. The first thing they may look for, if they qualify for some sort of treatments, any kind of assessments, things of that nature, are they Medicaid eligible? Have they applied for Medicaid? Is Medicaid going to take care of that for them, right? So if there's another funding source, then the bills eventually kind of trickle down to us after they've exhausted other opportunities, right? So you've seen that happen in the past. The other thing that we'll do is, sometimes in-house assessments we would try to get done here. Individual comes into court, they clearly have some issues. They're here that morning. We've been writing some assessments for either mental health or addiction services, things of that nature right out of the gate. So some of those run a little heavier and some don't. So we budget generally for the larger amount, and then hopefully, either we're not using them that much or that other funding sources are available to pay for it. But we generally just do that. And then again, it resides hopefully as a balance in the 208 fund if we don't use it. Same thing with the 209. So it just depends, and if we're doing some more, special services from some psych or something of that nature, those get a little pricey too. The other thing sometimes we don't know is if we're doing in-house evaluations for psychological evaluations, we have a run on maybe an NGRI or a competency issue, then those get expensive. Anything else? Good.
Thank you.
Anything else with that one? Okay. 95 is 210, huh? What's that mean? Page 95 is Fund 210, if that's right. Should be the next one. So 210 and 214 are similar. Let's focus on 210. 210 is a statute driven where the court can determine that for its efficient operation for its clerk of courts, computerization is necessary, or computerization helps the efficiency and the operation of its clerk of courts. All right. So that is maxed at $10 per case, all right? And we take that max of $10 per case, and that is then applied for court computerization, but really through the clerk's office. It's the court's orders, but it's through the clerk's determination of the clerk's efficient operation through computerization. And so we built, if I'm looking at the right one, so we built, and you'll notice it, I'll say a sizable balance, but there's a bit of a balance there. And the largest part computerization of the clerk's operation is what? A case management system, right? So if you happen to check cases online on the docket for us, that's a case management system. When a case is handled in here in traffic court in the morning or in the other courts there, and they go through and journal entries are processed and things are scheduled to come down into play and new cases are brought in. In fact, they're done electronically now, right? OSP and Barberton, you guys are all sending tickets electronically. That's a case management system, a CMS, that handles the processing of all of that, right? So as you might imagine, that's good work for some computer company, and there's different varieties of it. We use Henshin out of Cincinnati. It's an Ohio company, they're local, they're responsive, and they're not very expensive. If we were to go ahead and shift, and occasionally you think about it, because if you look at it's not as bad as some, but if you go around and you look at the clerk's office and the interface of that CMS, it's like, oh my gosh, you just step back about 20 years, right, in computing history. It's an older interface, but it works, right? There's nothing real crazy going on in there. It's just data scheduling, printing, and keeping track of cases, and it works. And if we got a problem, they're in Cincinnati, they handle it. So the large buildup here initially was for, okay, well, let's go to a more expensive CourtView or Pioneer or one of those. That's a $400,000 ticket right out of the gate to start. And then you're talking 5 figures plus for an annual maintenance contract with them. So that's a tough one to really make a decision to go that way when it all tends to work right here, right, the way it is. So we still maintain that. What we have done, and you'll see if you look, and I know you guys are watching, you'll see that some of those numbers have gotten a little bit larger, like the last 2 years, right? I'm getting nervous. What's going on? But what's happened, we've gone to PDF scanning, all right, through Henshin. Henshin's gone to PDF scanning, so when you want to bring down a document, it's a PDF, thank goodness. Before it was some deja vu viewer, which nobody wanted, and then if you wanted to look at it, you had to put a plug-in into your browser. Like, I ain't doing that, right? So nobody could see anything. So through a Supreme Court grant, we were able to convert that over to upgrade the Henshin system to allow PDFs. So now PDFs are there. So what's happened with PDFs and the digitation of all of the clerk's files? We start shredding them, more specifically cases, right? And so that's what you're seeing there on those larger expenditures over the last 2 years. It's probably peaked, and it's now going to come back down a little bit because we've really caught up. Some of the earlier stuff that's way old, we don't really need to worry too much about digitizing that, but a lot of the stuff and a lot of the, I'd say, cabinets, file shelves in there are gone because it's not digital. Sweet. So that's kind of what you're seeing there. Then the rest of that are, you have it out of the expenditures for personnel, the individuals that are kind of here, there's a couple, 3 that do some computer work, right? They kind of as a second hat, because we all wear a lot of hats here. You know, they do some computer work, so we supplement them because it is computer tied. We'll supplement their salaries with that through the 210 fund. Questions there? All right, you guys. I'm going to jump. So page 96 is the second page of that, which we talked about the professional services. The Swisscom was paid out of that and all that. But then the next one I would jump to would be 97. Page 97 is 211, and that is the Special Projects Building Fund. Okay, and you guys talked about that before. That is the building fund that we have for years just socked money away in an effort to, at some point, and maybe that point is coming, to expend towards court facilities, expansion of court facilities. It can be used by statute for any number of those things, acquisition, expansion, development. And so we look at it, and it's like 2.7 now. We usually get close to 3, and I know we've had some expenditures. If you have questions on, we can talk to you about what those are. We're there. It took a long time to get to 3, and it's funny because you guys have seen this. You start talking about, all right, well, let's move forward then on this building project, and man, $3 million just goes like that. You know, that's a tough thing. So we're cautious with that on what it gets spent for, but that's what it's for, right? Annually, and you'll see that number. We generally bring in about $220,000 annually on that fund. 25 of that covers half of the security downstairs. So we pledge half of the security downstairs. That's just shy of $25,000 for that one. So it rides right now. We're sitting right around $27,000 based on some expenditures over the last year and a half or so. Any questions there? All right, thank you. 214 is on page 99, and 214 is the court computerization. Same statute that allowed us to collect $10 allows us to collect $3 for the court. And that's for legal research and computerization. So we need a printer, we need toner, we need anything associated with the computerization of the court, yes, and then we pay for, we use Advance, LexisNexis Advance, which is just a great legal research tool for jury instructions, case law, all of that kind of stuff. Books, just don't use books anymore, right? It's just all electronic, and that's what's pulled out of there. Then we supplement an IT administrator there too for some of that court work. Questions there? Okay, we'd go to page 102. Thought you were bored? Wait till you hear about this one. Okay, so 220. which is on page 102, IDAT and idiom. And Betty, when you talked about us being able to now use different funds for some professional services, we're now finally opening this fund up, and when I say we, the state of Ohio legislature has opened this fund up a little bit. So what is IDAT and what is idiom, okay? IDAT is Indigent Drivers Alcohol Treatment Program, and idiom is Indigent Drivers Interlock and Alcohol Monitoring Program, right? So your OVI cases that come through here, they're by statute, certain dollar amount of that $375 mandatory minimum fine, whatever, gets kicked down to Columbus, and then comes back to us, right? And that is in the IDAT and IDAT and idiom. So IDAT can be used for OVI cases, indigent defendants, most of them, for alcohol assessment, training, treatment, and transportation. So alcohol assessment, treatment, and transportation. Idiom can be used for monitoring and immobilization. So the guardian interlock that you have to blow into to start it, right? An indigent individual charged with OVI, they can pay for that if they can't afford to pay for it. The immobilization of the car, they can pay for that. So all of that, the scram bracelets, if we're going to do that, they can pay for the monitoring. So it can pay just for those things. That's rather limited, and you see a bit of money came in on those, right, historically. That's all we could use it for. So statute changed first to allow us to declare a surplus, and you'll see an IDAT surplus. Surplus, we can say, hey, we got enough money to do what the statute says we can do with it. We're sitting on extra. The statute allows us to declare a surplus through the ADM board and move it over to a surplus. That allows me now to use it for any criminal defendant offense with an indigent defendant that needs help with alcohol assessment, transportation, or treatment. So now I can have them blown open outside the OVI offenses. I'm now with any criminal offense. So that helps greatly. And then it blew open one more time and allows us to use it for expenditures associated with a Supreme Court certified specialized docket for us. So now I can use it also in my alcohol or any kind of treatments for my drug courts and for the mental health courts. So that helped greatly, So we use them for that. And again, those are all done by statute. It's done then by journal entry, expended by journal entry, and then monitored. We have a report that goes down to the state of Ohio every year that shows, hey, this is what we spent it on, this is what we received, and we're good from there. I think that's it. Are there any questions? Anything else? Okay, all right. There you go. Thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, take care. Any questions come up later?
Oh, yeah.
I think the finance director said it last 2 weeks ago how fun accounting is. So, this is the difficulty with so many funds and municipal court and strict laws from the state or local laws that govern the different funds. So I know it's a lot of information. So that's all we had to present for tonight. Looking at presenting 3 more departments next week or the next 2 weeks. So that will include planning. Utilities is a big one. So that's utilities department, water treatment, wastewater treatment, and then also clerk of courts. And then obviously any questions in the meantime. But that's all we had for this evening.
So next week is planning, utilities, and clerk of courts?
Yeah, I may push clerk of courts out a little further because utilities is pretty involved.
I gotcha. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Is there any other miscellaneous discussion for planning?
Planning?
From my, I'm sorry, I'm used to being on planning. For finance. From my committee, other council members, the gallery. Hearing none, can I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you. And a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. We are adjourned at 7:17 p.m.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Thompson. That concludes our individual committee meetings for this evening. We're going to take a 3-minute break and come back and do our regular legislative meeting. A few seconds is a minute. 2 minutes. We'll take another 3.
It didn't come back there.
All right, awesome. All right, today's Monday, February 26, 2024. This is a regular legislative meeting of Barberton City Council. I call this meeting to order at 7:33 p.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation by myself. Oh, I got you. Okay, I was going. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, thank you for the beautiful day in February. I want to thank you for looking out after our friends and family throughout the city. Thank you for watching over Councilman Cheatham as he had surgery. Thank you for watching over Mrs. Coburn through her times. I'd ask that you continue to shed your will and grace on our city as we transition into a new weather season. And always remember the 22. Amen. Excuse me.
Excuse you.
It's all right. You wanted it oiled. We got it oiled. Now our chair makes noise. All right. Clerk, please call the roll.
President Greer.
Present.
Mr. Hyden.
Here.
Mrs. Thompson.
Here.
Mrs. Hager.
Here.
Mr. Cheatham is absent. Mr. Griffin.
Here.
Mrs. Beck.
Here.
Mrs. Gerhart.
Here.
Mr. Harris.
Here.
Any approval of the minutes? Approval of minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on Monday, February 12th, 2024. Mr. Riddick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to approve the minutes of the regular legislative meeting from Monday, February 12th, 2024.
Thank you. Mrs. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mr. Heidick's motion to approve the minutes from February 12th, 2024.
Thank you. It was moved by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Thompson to approve the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on February 12th, 2024 as presented. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, minutes are adopted. Move over to the finance report. Approval of the finance report for the month of January 2024 as presented. Mrs. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the approval of the finance report for the month of January 2024 as presented.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I second that motion.
Thank you. It was moved by Mrs. Thompson and seconded by Mr. Heidick to accept the finance report for the month of January 2024 as presented. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, financial report is adopted. Petitions and claims.
There are none.
Matters requested.
They've all been dispersed.
Thank you. Citizens addressing council. There. Thank you. First reading of ordinances and resolutions.
Ordinance number 14-2024 presented by Mrs. Thompson. Title 2024 Operating and Capital Budget. An ordinance adopting a budget for various funds of the City of Barberton for the period beginning January 1st, 2024, and providing for the administration thereof and declaring it an emergency. This ordinance was amended this evening in the Finance Committee to reflect changes in the stormwater management portion of the enterprise funds. So this will be as amended February 26, 2024. This ordinance will go for 3 readings, or it's scheduled to go for 3 readings. This is the first reading. Ordinance number 15-2024 presented by Mrs. Thompson, title Amending Ordinance number 73-2022 Employee Compensation and Pay Grades for Non-Bargaining Employees. And ordinance amending ordinance number 73-2022 and declaring an emergency. This will go for 2 readings. Ordinance number 16-2024 presented by Mrs. Thompson. Title, Note Ordinance, Stormwater Management System Project. An ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of not to exceed $325,000 of notes in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying costs of improving the city's stormwater management system by constructing and improving stormwater drainage facilities, including but not limited to storm sewers, ditches, backflow prevention devices, wetland construction, catch basins, and other facilities for the retention and control of waters, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and acquiring any real estate or interest in real estate necessary therefore, as designated in the plans approved or to be approved by council and declaring an emergency. Fiscal Officer's Certificate to the Council of the City of Barberton. As Fiscal Officer of the City of Barberton, I certify in connection with your proposed issue of not to exceed $325,000 of notes, the notes, to be issued in anticipation of the issuance of bonds, for the purpose of paying costs of improving the city's stormwater management system by constructing and improving stormwater drainage facilities, including but not limited to storm sewers, ditches, backflow prevention devices, wetland construction, catch basins, and other facilities for the retention and control of waters, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and acquiring any real estate or interest in real estate necessary, therefore, as designated in the plans approved or to be approved by council, the improvement. 1, the estimated life or period of usefulness of the improvement is at least 5 years. 2, the estimated maximum maturity of the bonds calculated in accordance with section 133.20 of the revised code is 40 years. If notes in anticipation of the bonds are outstanding later than the last day of December of the 5th year, following the year of issuance of the original issue of notes, the period in excess of those 5 years shall be deducted from that maximum maturity of the bonds. 3, maximum maturity of the notes is April 12, 2043, which is 20 years from the April 12, 2023, the date of issuance of the original notes issued for this purpose. Dated February 7, 2024, Jeremy Flaker, Director of Finance, City of Barberton.
Motion to suspend. Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule is required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second Counselor Thompson's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Thompson and seconded by Mr. Heidick to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Hager.
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mr. Cheatham is absent. Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Mrs. Beck.
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart.
Yes.
Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt. Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 16-2024.
Thank you. And Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second the motion to adopt.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Thompson and seconded by Mr. Heidick to adopt ordinance number 16-2024. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Ms. Gerhart.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson.
Yes.
Mrs. Beck.
Yes.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Mr. Cheatham is absent. Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mrs. Hager.
Yes.
Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 17-2024, presented by Mrs. Thompson. Title: Note Ordinance, Street Improvement Project. An ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of not to exceed $1,800,000 of notes in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying costs of improving streets and roads in the city by resurfacing, reconstructing, paving, and making other improvements, together with all necessary related improvements and appurtenances thereto, as designated in the plans approved or to be approved by council and declaring an emergency. Fiscal Officer's Certificate to the Council of the City of Barberton, Ohio. As Fiscal Officer of the City of Barberton, Ohio, I certify in connection with your proposed issue of not to exceed $1,800,000 of notes, the notes to be issued in anticipation of the issuance of bonds the bonds, for the purpose of paying costs of improving streets and roads in the city by resurfacing, reconstructing, paving, and making other improvements, together with all necessary related improvements and appurtenances thereto, as designated in the plans approved or to be approved by council. The improvement. 1. The estimated life or period of usefulness of the improvement is at least 5 years. 2. The estimated maximum maturity of the bonds calculated in accordance with section 133.20 of the revised code is 15 years. If notes in anticipation of the bonds are outstanding later than the last day of December of the 5th year following the issue of the original issue of notes, the period in excess of those 5 years shall be deducted from that maximum maturity of the bonds. 3. The maximum maturity of the notes is April 13th, 2042, which is 20 years from April 13th, 2022, the date of issuance of the original notes issued for this purpose. Dated February 7th, 2024, Jeremy Flaker, Director of Finance, City of Barberton, Ohio.
Motion to suspend.
Sorry, motion to suspend, Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second Counselor Thompson's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Thompson and second by Mr. Heidick to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Beck?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Hager?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Cheatham is absent.
Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt. Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 17-2024.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second the motion to adopt.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Thompson and second by Mr. Heidick to adopt ordinance number 17-2024. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Cheatham is absent. Mrs. Hager?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Beck?
Yes.
Motion for adoption carries.
18, ordinance number 18-2024, presented by Mrs. Thompson. Title, note ordinance, meter reading system replacement project. An ordinance providing for the issuance of and sale of not to exceed $250,000 of notes in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying the cost, acquiring and installing advanced radio metering system equipment to be used in connection with the municipal sewer and water systems, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and declaring an emergency. Fiscal Officer's Certificate to the Council of the City of Barberton, Ohio. This fiscal officer, as fiscal officer of the City of Barberton, Ohio, I certify in connection with your proposed issue of not to exceed $250,000 of notes, to be issued in anticipation of the issuance of bonds, for the purpose of paying costs of acquiring and installing advanced radio metering system equipment to be used in connection with the municipal sewer and water systems, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, the improvement. 1, the estimated life or period of usefulness of the improvement is at least 5 years. 2, the estimated maximum maturity of the bonds calculated in accordance with section 133.20 of the revised code is 10 years. Being my estimate of the life or period of usefulness of the improvement, if notes in anticipation of the bonds are outstanding later than the last day of the 5th of December of the 5th year, following the year of issuance of the original issue of the notes, the period in excess of those 5 years shall be deducted from the maximum maturity of the bonds. Therefore, the maximum maturity of the bonds is 7 years. The maximum maturity of the notes is April 20th, 2032, which is 15 years from April 20th, 2017, the date of issuance of the original notes issued for this purpose. Dated February 7th, 2024, Jeremy Flaker, Director of Finance, City of Barberton, Ohio.
Motion to suspend, Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule is required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. And Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second Counselor Thompson's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Thompson and second by Mr. Heidick to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mrs. Hager.
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart.
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Cheatham is absent. Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Mrs. Beck.
Yes.
Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt. Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 18-2024.
Thank you. And Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second the motion to adopt.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Thompson and second by Mr. Heidick to adopt ordinance number 18-2024. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Beck.
Yes.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mr. Cheatham is absent. Mrs. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart.
Yes.
Mrs. Hager.
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 19-2024, presented by Mrs. Thompson. Title, Note Ordinance, Front Loader Acquisition Project. An ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of not to exceed $115,000 of notes in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying costs of acquiring a front loader for use in carrying out functions of the road and storm sewer departments and declaring an emergency. Fiscal Officer's Certificate. To the Council of the City of Barberton, Ohio. As Fiscal Officer of the City of Barberton, Ohio, I certify in connection with your proposed issue of not to exceed $115,000 of notes, the notes, to be issued in anticipation of the issuance of bonds, for the purpose of paying costs of acquiring a front loader for use in carrying out functions of the road and storm sewer departments. The improvement. 1. The estimated life or period of usefulness of the improvement is at least 5 years. 2. The estimated maximum maturity of the bonds, calculated in accordance with Section 133.20 of the revised code, is 10 years. If notes in anticipation of the bonds are outstanding later than the last day of December of the 5th year following the issuance of the original issue of notes, the period in excess of those 5 years shall be deducted from that maximum maturity of the bonds. The maximum maturity of the notes is April 12, 2038, which is 15 years from April 12, 2023, the date of issuance of the original notes issued for this purpose. Dated February 7, 2024, Jeremy Flaker, Director of Finance, City of Barberton, Ohio.
Motion to suspend.
Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule is required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. And Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I second the Counselor Thompson's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Thompson and seconded by Mr. Heidick to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart.
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hager.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mrs. Beck.
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mr. Cheatham is absent.
Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt. Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 19-2024.
Thank you. And Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second the motion to adopt.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Thompson and seconded by Mr. Heidick to adopt ordinance number 19-2024. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Cheatham is absent. Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mrs. Beck.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mrs. Hager.
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart.
Yes.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Motion for adoption carries.
Number 20-2024, presented by Mrs. Thompson. Title, Note Ordinance, Trickling Filter System at Wastewater Treatment Plant. An ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of not to exceed $50,000 of notes in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying costs of reconstructing and improving the trickling filter system at the municipal wastewater treatment plant, together with all appurtenances thereto, and declaring an emergency. Fiscal Officer's Certificate. To the Council of the City of Barberton, Ohio. As fiscal officer of the City of Barberton, Ohio, I certify in connection with your proposed issue of not to exceed $50,000 of notes, the notes to be issued in anticipation of the issuance of bonds, for the purpose of paying costs of reconstructing and improving the trickling filter system at the municipal wastewater treatment plant, together with all appurtenances thereto, the improvement. The estimated life or period of usefulness of the improvement is at least 5 years. 2, the estimated maximum maturity of the bonds calculated in accordance with section 133.20 of the revised code is 40 years, being my estimate of the life of the period of usefulness of the improvement. If notes and anticipations of the bonds are outstanding later than the last day of December of the 5th year following the year of issuance of the original issue of notes, the period in excess of those 5 years shall be deducted from the maximum maturity of the bonds. 3, the maximum maturity of the notes is April 15th, 2040, which is 20 years from April 15th, 2020, the date of issuance of the original notes issued for this purpose. Dated February 7th, 2024, Jeremy Flaker, Director of Finance, City of Barberton, Ohio.
Motion to suspend, Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you, Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second Counselor Thompson's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Thompson and seconded by Mr. Heidick to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Cheatham is absent. Ms. Gerhart?
Yes.
Mrs. Beck?
Yes.
Mrs. Hager?
Yes.
Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 20-2024.
Thank you, and Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second the motion to adopt.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Thompson and seconded by Mr. Heidick to adopt ordinance number 20-2024. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Hager?
Yes.
Mrs. Beck?
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart?
Yes.
Mr. Cheatham is absent. Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Motion for adoption carries.
This ends the first reading.
Second reading of ordinances and resolutions.
There are none.
Third reading of ordinances and resolutions.
There are none.
Appointments.
There are none.
Miscellaneous and unfinished business. Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to motion to excuse Counselor Cheatham from tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second? No, not quick enough. Ms. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mr. Heidick's motion to excuse Mr. Cheatham for this evening.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Thompson to excuse Councilperson Cheatham from today's meeting, February 26, 2024. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Cheatham is excused. Is there anything from the body? Anything from department heads? It's a long night. The only thing I just have to say is watch out for your neighbors. Look out. We do have some storms coming in, as I mentioned earlier. Some of the weather's changing, and it's pretty severe, so it's jumping from 60 down to 30 all the way all over the place. So you never know. Sometimes they say we'll get hit pretty hard, and we don't get anything. Sometimes they say it'll blow it over, and we get a tornado. So just keep an eye out. Be vigilant. Other than that, communication from the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Council, just so you know, we only have to do those note ordinances once a year.
Thank God.
You're a wonderful town.
She did talk us into it this time.
And, Councilman Greer contacted me today asking about, he had some people inquire about the citywide yard sale. It's not until June, but he probably got calls because I saw people that appeared to be spring cleaning this weekend. It's still February. I swear I heard a lawnmower this weekend.
There was.
For sure.
Yes.
But as President Greer said, there's some drastic changes that continue to happen with the weather, so. I want to thank everyone who attended last week's Change for Change at the Hungarian Club, and I want to thank them for hosting. They benefited Rotary, raised over $420 for them. Next Change for Change will be Friday, March 22nd at the Civitan Club, benefiting the Barberton Band Boosters. I had several business visits last week. Also met with Dan Rice, the Executive Director of the Ohio Erie Canalway Coalition. We've been doing some work with his organization, and we'll continue to work on some exciting plans. So hopefully we come to council soon with some plans here. Ms. Eisman and myself met with the Barberton High School students, a few of them, last week on the municipal program. That continues. So it's great giving exposure to the kids of what positions are here in the city of Barberton. How do you get those positions? You know, is it union, non-union, appointed? What kind of civil service test do you need? Those types of things. What kind of skills do you need for those? So very, very great program that we've been able to put together with the schools. Kind of along the same lines, earlier with the warmer weather and the changing of the weather and clocks here in a few weeks, just be mindful of those that may be walking in the street. Still dark, pretty dark in the morning. They're walking to school or work or just out for a leisure walk. Could be black ice. You know, it's these time when you have cold temperatures in the overnight. You could have black ice in the morning, and then it heats up in the afternoon. So just be mindful of those people who might be out and about. And then just finally, we'll continue with the budget next week. And I say this every week, but any questions, feel free to give us an email or a call. That's all I have. Yes?
You hinted on it, but you didn't give a date for the yard sales. Do you know yet?
It's the first or second week in June.
It's always the second weekend in June. The poster's already with them.
Yeah, I knew we had the poster put together. I know one year we moved it during COVID to August.
Right. I went back in the records. I seen that. I go, that doesn't seem right. But okay, second weekend.
Second weekend in June.
I didn't want to give anything public until we actually had like those dates.
Yeah, I know the flyer's done. I just couldn't recall if it was first or
Okay.
second week.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you.
Awesome. With nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adjourn.
Thank you. Mrs. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second that motion to adjourn.
Thank you. It was moved by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Thompson that we adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Didn't think so. This meeting is adjourned at 8 p.m. I normally use my fist. Do you ever notice that?